Doug McGuirk is an accomplished entrepreneur, musician, producer, and inspirational speaker. Doug was a top trainer for Tony Robbins and co-authored Multiple Streams of Inspiration with Jack Canfield. He has applied his skills to an innovative method of working with people in addictions and recovery and has a lot to say about what skills you need to succeed in the world of coaching. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. So welcome, Doug McGuirk, to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Good to see you again, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's been far too long. I'm remiss in not reaching out as much as I should. So
no, the remission is mine. No, that doesn't sound right. But nevertheless, it's good to see you again, no matter who's at fault for not making it happen sooner. For the record, we used to see each other a lot because you took a bunch of my classes back in the day.
Yes. You are my OG mentor.
OG, what's that stand for?
Original Gangster.
Oh, right.
Yeah. You were my first real and, dare I say, best trainer of NLP and hypnosis.
I think you dare say that. I think you
I did dare.
Go right ahead.
I went right past it. I said it.
Wow, baby.
I didn't even dare.
Yes. So, we learned some NLP together back in the day. So that's very cool.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to also be a teaching assistant, as it were, for several classes, and then brought you in to do some stuff in when I was at Palm, and we taught sleight of mouth, and you're brilliant.
Yeah, long standing. So, in fact, if you're tired, you can sit down anytime. But we are long standing friends and colleagues. And so as a teaching assistant, that was pretty awesome to have you there because you are very competent, and it's nice to see students turn out well. Question for you. Do you consider yourself a coach?
That's such a great question. I would say yes. I like to think, in some ways too, as a mentor and teacher. But coaching is definitely in there. Sometimes I call myself a lifestylist, as opposed to a coach, simply for the fact of oftentimes there's a lot of preconceived notions that people have, some people have around the word coach. There are some people who have adopted coach rather freely. So sometimes if I use neurostrategist or lifestylist, peak performance lifestylist, it begs the question, what's that? What does that mean?
Right. So instead of just getting stuck in a little cubbyhole that they think they know what that means.
Right. And I've actually had this happen. And it's what inspired me to do it anymore. I was at and I was being lazy in, when someone asks, what do you do? And, I think I'd been with this person for a little while, and I kind of got a read on what their model of the world was anyway. And I was like, this is, he's not going to refer me anybody, and he's not certainly going to be a client. After talking with him a bit, and, I said, I told him I'm a speaker, trainer, and a coach. And he's like, oh, yeah, coach, you're one of those kind of thing. I'm like, okay, yeah. So I'm going to have to come up with a better way to share what I do, to at least beg the question, what is that? And share what that really means, as opposed to what someone thinks it means.
Okay. So what does it really mean?
For me, it's supporting someone through their own personal challenges, whether it be personal or professional. The personal drives the professional anyway. Mm-hmm. So as a coach, my role is to help that person see the opportunities to take their life, whatever we're talking about, whether it be personal or professional, and move the needle to that next level and help them figure out how to do it so they have ownership of it. so that while I may be teaching some ideas, some concepts, some theory, the goal for me as a coach is have them apply it, get the results. And I think the coaching sort of moniker came from looking at sports coaches and how they weren't hitting the ball for the baseball player or throwing the hoop. They were sharing their wisdom, their opportunities, their observations to help the person actually follow through and take those actions and get the results.
Right. So they weren't doing it for them. They were showing.
So that was a very long-winded answer.
No, it's great. It's a good answer.
Correct. Yeah.
But I agree with you, because there's a lot of people who use the word coaching with, I don't know if it's a real clear idea of what they mean by that exactly. It's so generalized and such a generalized, overused term in a way. It's like, well, it doesn't mean anything in a way, because it can mean anything. So if it can mean anything, then it doesn't mean it. You know what I'm saying? So backing up a little bit, we mentioned that you took NLP courses from me, but you also worked with Tony Robbins for a long time, right? Doug?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was on the road with Tony for 4 years, almost 4 years. And then also subsequently got my trainer on the road. Well, that's a loose term, but what I did was as a trainer for Tony, I would go to a city before him for a few months and do trainings and presentations and hold events as an introduction to Tony's UPW. So my position was called Peak Performance Strategist, or national trainer. And the gig was I go into these Fortune 500 companies, real estate, insurance, financial advisors, MLMs, you name it, and go in and do a training for them, and then offer the opportunity to come see Tony in that city. And one of the things I did, part of my gig, was I would also do events for them in preparation for the event. So you'd also get a full day event, seminar before the seminar, like an appetizer, as it were. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's pretty neat. So that's a lot of on the job training there, isn't it? I mean, that's amazing, actually.
Quite a bit. Yeah, that was, and luckily enough to get some direct training, stage training and such from Tony, which was pretty fun and
I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit there. Pretty fun and what?
And intense.
And intense, yes.
Intense.
Like quite intense, yeah.
Yeah, like in a campground.
Intense, yes, like the old joke about the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
You know that old joke?
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh, it goes like this. There's an old joke about a guy who comes into a psychiatrist and he says, Doctor, I'm all confused. At first I think I'm a wigwam, and then I think I'm a teepee, and then I think I'm a wigwam, and then I think I'm a teepee, and then I think I'm a wigwam, and then I think I'm a teepee, and the doctor says, "Stop! You're just too tense." That's the joke.
Funny.
Yeah, I thought it was funny at the time.
I'm going to use that.
So, for you, when you were doing all that as a trainer, in a sort of sales position, really getting people to come to Tony's larger events by doing those training events, did you ever consider yourself a coach at those times during those things? Were you doing coaching with those people?
Well, I was both. I was coaching. I had my own clients anyway, because while I was traveling and meeting people, there were opportunities, and plus I was coaching prior to that. I'd been trained with you. I was probably 5 or 6 years as using NLP and coaching and speaking in the music world before I got the gig with Tony in the first place. So I still had some clients and so forth. And at the end of the day, coaching in many respects is sales anyway, from my perspective. We're selling someone on a new way of thinking, a new way of behaving. One of the things was interesting when I got recruited to the treatment center, to Palm Healthcare, to Palm Partners, from Tony. And, we were brought in to bring that style, the seminar style of teaching and coaching. And we ran the coaching department and did a lot of other work with the families and so forth. One of the clients said, you're like a slick salesperson. And I was like, good, thank you. I said, what am I selling? And they didn't really have an answer. I said, well, you're right. I am a salesperson, and everyone in this room is as well, but I'm right now selling you on you. Everything I'm doing right now is, my intention is to show you what you're capable of, to give you the opportunity to learn that there is another way, and that you have the resources within you to make these changes. You've created incredible things in the past, and you can create incredible things in the future just because you've had some challenges. Yeah, my goal is to sell you on possibility right now. And like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. And, hopefully they're still doing well. And they still bought into themselves.
Right. For the viewers who don't know what you're talking about as far as that job was, what is Palm? What is Palm?
Palm Healthcare was a treatment center, drug and alcohol treatment center. Mm-hmm. And we worked with clients, came in all levels of care. So our typical client came in through detox. So their life had become so unmanageable, they've lost everything. And generally people don't go to treatment unless they've lost everything, because otherwise they'd be, quote, functional. Sadly, most people, as long as they're making some money, they got a roof over their head, then they're okay. So oftentimes by the time people came to treatment, they've lost everything.
So this is like a residential rehab center?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. They'd start out in detox, and then it was residential treatment. And so they do their, 5 days, 8 days, 10, whatever, they needed in detox. Then they would live on our grounds, and then we saw them every day, for treatment and, therapy. And, they had therapists there. They had, doctors, all that, psychiatrists and so forth. And what my wife Heidi and I did was we ran a large portion of the treatment. We were a huge part of the clinical team. We were with the clients, multiple groups a day, had them all day, and ran events for the families on weekends. So we did our own sort of personal development program for the family program, where we had them for 3 days, like a seminar, and helped really create a lot of space for healing and so forth. And really it was that, on top of all the work with Tony, what really honed coaching skills and communication skills for me was working in that environment, because that was super intense. And we got those 10,000 hours real quick, doing that every day for 8 years.
No, it's one of the reasons I wanted you to be on this program, because, you have been, in the proverbial trenches. It's one thing, if you're doing trainings, you and I have both done trainings. We both stand up on the stage and talk to people and, talk about concepts, talk about procedures and, but to actually do it with a person who doesn't really know anything about the concepts or the procedures, but just is in pain, whether it's emotional or psychological or physical or, whatever, and needs help. And you got to use your skills to help them. And they may be not in a position where they are, a lot of times in coaching, people are not needing therapy. They're fine. They're doing really well. You're just helping them to get to the next rung up the ladder kind of thing, but they're doing pretty good. So coaching is a lot of times enhancement, but you've been helping people who have lost everything, and are in this stuff where they really desperately need concrete help. They really need some serious help. And you've been able to do that.
They're also, dare I say, resistant. Yeah. One thing when, you were doing an NLP training or a seminar, or someone hires us to coach us, they made the effort to come in, and they know that they need it and so forth. Very often, like the typical hangover, maybe when they finally went to detox, they're like, oh, like I'm going to die kind of thing. But then after they get out of detox, they're feeling better. Like, what the heck am I doing here? I got to be here for 30 days. Who's this idiot? Oh, screw this. And they're filled with anger and rage and guilt and remorse and, fear. There's all an incredible wide range of emotions that they're going through. And, we would start our day every day with club rehab, where it was dancing in the morning. And it would be interesting to see the transformation of, you'd start out and some people would get up into residence and get into that level of care and come up in the morning and just be sitting there pissed off, hearing the music and going, oh, this is stupid. Right. And just so resistant. And then, then we come out and get them into state. And there were some things they had to do. Like everyone had to stand up at the end of, like, when it was time to go, we had all these anchors set, with music and behaviors to go, okay. And this is, it doesn't matter where you are in the building. You heard Zombie Nation. That meant everybody come into the room because the day is starting. And, but we made everybody stand up and sing, the one word, oh, and like, you'd see them like, oh, and they'd be pissed off. And then after some time, after working with them, they become the biggest advocates for some of the work we were doing because it was working for them. But it definitely took some effort.
Yeah. So that is really, really fascinating because obviously, you picked some of that up from Tony Robbins, I'm guessing, from the years with Tony. Most people who are listening to this program are probably thinking, you did what exactly with these guys in rehab? You got them to be singing and dancing in the morning? And what the heck? What's the purpose behind this, Doug?
From our perspective, it was multiple-fold. One of them was to create energy, because it's really hard to get people to move when they're stuck. Mm-hmm. But if we got them moving a little bit, at least there was, even if they got pissed off, it was still energy, and we can now start using that. But if they're just like sitting there, just going through the motions, sitting there, okay, being just complacent and playing the game, there's no challenge. We're not getting enough energy to dance with, to move and take that energy somewhere. That was one small piece. Another one was the dancing was to get dopamine going. I mean, quite honestly, they're dopamine deprived. All of their neurotransmitters of well-being have basically their body's ability to create them shut down because they were getting it from external sources. It was being stimulated by the alcohol or the heroin or the meth or whatever it was they were consuming, the opioids, whatever it was. So by encouraging them to do some things that got them moving, it started to help rewire their brain. And they started to go, oh, wait, I can feel good. The other thing was to collapse old anchors. So for our NLP friends, a lot of the people who may have created their challenges through partying may feel like they're never going to be able to dance again or go to a club or go to a wedding or go to a party or go to anything, because if there's dancing and they're not consuming drugs or alcohol, they're not going to be able to have a good time. So it was purposeful to show them that they can have a good time so they don't have that anxiety when they leave, because if you're taught basically the only state you've now connected abstinence to is doing nothing, when you leave, you're going to feel like, oh, great, all I could do is nothing. Instead, and we don't want them to miss out on life and to celebrate and go to parties and weddings and all that. We want them to feel absolutely confident that they can. So every day, one of the other things we did with the last song we would do would be like a line dance that you'd hear typically at a wedding. So we would be doing, like the Macarena or the Cupid Shuffle or, whatever the big one at the time would have been. Like there was that one, I can't remember the one, the guy, the Korean, South Korean. Korean,
yeah. I know what you mean.
Whichever that one, we used to use that one. But there's a bunch of songs that we would do that, that if you went to a party like that you'd hear that, and we would want them having positive associations, feel confident. Zombie Nation, go to a sports game. How many times you go to a sports game and they're playing some of those songs? We wanted to be like, to be able to feel confident, not be like, I can't go to see a sport. My favorite thing was to drink at a football game and then go, I can't go to a football game.
Right, exactly. No, I think that's brilliant. I really do. I think that's brilliant because, it's often said in again, in seminars or books or whatever, that learning is state related.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. Learning is state related. And yet, most coaching, most therapy, it's like, well, let's sit and talk about this situation and we're going to be in. So you're in a sit and talk about it state, talking about things. And yeah, lots of things are possible when you're in that therapist's office. But if you start hearing that music and if you've gone to the game or whatever, it's like, well, this anchor means alcohol or drugs or whatever else. So you're creating different states where they can learn different behaviors while in that state.
And collapse the old anchor, hopefully.
Collapse the old anchor, yeah, absolutely. I think that's brilliant. I think that's great.
And it worked really well. We still to this day have, people reaching out and sharing that, it was because of things like that, they're able to celebrate their life and they weren't intimidated by a wedding or a party that they had coming up. They were able to actually do it. And we would do it with the families as well.
So tell me about that. When you say the families, these are fathers or mothers in rehab, and so the rest of the family?
Yeah. Imagine you have a loved one, whether it be a spouse or a sibling or a child, that for the last X amount of years, all you've been doing is fearing for this person or arguing with that person or having these challenges and so forth. And a lot of what we learned was a lot of family programs would essentially end up being like a mediation of an argument. Like they would come in and be like, okay, and there's a time and place for that. And we let the therapist do that. Like, okay, go ahead, get out whatever, get it off your chest. You have a right to be angry. Go ahead. Tell them how effed up they were and all that. And we looked at it and said, okay, what do they really want? They want to get back together. So we don't need to be talking about all the crap that they did. Let's create an environment where they've experienced something for the first time or in a long time, like dancing together, like having that. So we would do the same thing. We would put them in the exact same position, have the families without them at first, be, kind of learning about all this stuff and whatnot, and then bring them all together and have them dance together, have them do all of that. And again, you'd see some people like being, I ain't doing it. No way. Right. Cause now I'm embarrassed because I'm with my mom, but then you get them up there or with my husband or wife. And then what happens is they lose themselves. Without them realizing it, we are putting them in trance and we're giving them the opportunity to lose themselves in that moment. Do the line dance, do the board break, do all this stuff and share all these things. And at the end of it, they're going, I haven't laughed with my significant other, with my loved one, in years. I can't remember the last time we've had this bonding experience where we weren't talking about drugs or alcohol or weren't talking about the police or we were actually talking about beautiful things and celebrating the future and doing it in a way that again is anchored to the experience that they can go, well, it's possible.
Yeah.
If it's possible, we can do it.
And drugs and alcohol are nowhere in sight, not even in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
and it also created a space for compassion and empathy, because we also would alleviate the family's sense of responsibility, because they would look back and go, what did I do wrong? Like some of them would go and think it was their fault. Right. And we also would show them how it wasn't their fault. We, essentially we would show basically at one point, the beginning of the thing, we would talk about the science behind addiction and how it happens neurobiologically and it had nothing to do with them at all. And as drugs and alcohol aren't the problem. They're the solution.
I'm reminded as you talk about that I was watching an interview with Bill Moyers a long time ago. He was talking with I've forgotten exactly the man's background. It was during a Joseph Campbell interview, during the brilliant series of shows on PBS by Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell, the interviews. Hero with 1,000 Faces, I think was the title of the series. But he was talking about this man. He said, what is your theology? What is your methodology behind, your beliefs? He said, well, I don't think we have theology or methodology. We dance. And also Bradford Kinney. I remember Bradford Kinney had a workshop he was, he's a brilliant guy, Bradford Kinney, and was, studied with Erickson and written several books on family therapy, and he was just a brilliant guy, but he was fascinated by shamanism. So he would go to these different cultures that had various different kinds of shaman, and he would live with those people for 6 months. So he said, when he was living with the Bushmen of the Kalahari, that when a person was needing therapy or help or healing of one kind or another, they would build a big bonfire and they'd get the village out and the drummers out and they would dance all night. And during the period of time of this dancing, some people would kind of go into these, trances, and it was the rest of the village's job at that point to make sure they didn't fall into the fire or wander off into the jungle where they could become, tiger, lion food or whatever. But it was, that's how they did healing. I think we learned in neurolinguistic programming a long time ago that the neuro part is not just the gray matter between your ears. It's your body. It's the whole kit and caboodle. It's the kit and caboodle. You got to have the caboodle in there too.
Yeah. So, otherwise it's, that's like kibbles and.
Yeah, exactly. So I love your approach to doing this. This is so innovative, so interesting, and so brilliant, I think. So,
and simplistically speaking as well, like you shared the dancing, energy plus motion is emotion.
Right,
and
emotion.
Yeah, so our goal was to help them figure out how to experience emotions again and live at the cause, not at the effect of them.
That's great. That's so cool. So cool. So, in these Essential Coaching Skill podcasts, I have promised to, and I will keep the promise for at least one more day, ask the people in these interviews, if there were one essential coaching skill, what would you say that is?
It's such a great question, and I'm sure that you've got some amazing answers, and I don't think there's just one per se. I think it's a cocktail, of course. But I would start with a foundation of authentic care for the person, authentic concern, authentic desire to help that person. And from a position of the doctors, oath of do no harm, that the role in that relationship is to help that person advance and genuinely care and understand where they're coming from to help them advance, notwithstanding ourselves. And, from our perspective, and I know it sounds kind of weird and I don't know if it's trite, I never want credit for the change because I have to be there all the time. If I did it for them, even if they think, it's like, well, it's because of you. Like, no, hold on. It's not because of me. I was there and I guided you and I pointed you in the right direction. And maybe I made you thirsty enough to drink the life-saving water, but you took those actions. You can continue to. So, it's that, almost, parental, dare I say, like desire for that person to be able to figure it out on their own. And if I need to, expose them or turn their head a little bit to see the opportunity in front of them, that's great. And I still, while the psycho remuneration is seeing them succeed, it's not for receiving the credit for the occasion. That makes sense.
I love that. So if that's the main ingredient in your cocktail, what are some of the other essential coaching skills that would go into your cocktail of essential coaching skills?
Well, I believe that NLP, learning that is phenomenal. What's really interesting is, like sleight of mouth, for example. Sleight of mouth is so powerful. And when one of the gigs I did when I was working in treatment was I spoke at all the conferences on addiction and so forth and shared, our model. And, there was this one person who's like, okay, we're doing this, really cool, progressive, like really powerful, set of protocols called motivational interviewing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to check this out. And I sit down and it's sleight of mouth. It's NLP. It's like all, and I'm like, you really call it what you want. Use it. This is awesome. But it's so powerful. The ability to ask those questions, to collapse belief systems, to, open up possibility thinking, is phenomenal. So even if someone is not ready to dive into, for anyone who's listening, like looking at doing coaching, learn sleight of mouth, master that, because that is certainly an incredible set of tools to help move people down the line of their outcomes.
Great. Well, I certainly like that answer.
It's, it's genuine, it's earnest, because that was, for me, so powerful to really be able to, dare I say, or, like compartmentalize some things that we already inherently know, some that we're already doing, but to be able to give it a name, sort of like, and to be able to grasp it, it helped so much to go, okay, cool. It was able to master it more, to have some more clarity with skill set.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, that's actually very true. And I've seen that happen a number of times, actually. I'm sure you have as well, that people are basically doing NLP and calling it a different name. And in fairness, of course, NLP's stole things from other places also. We call it anchoring, but it's really basically a stimulus response that we stole from behavioral psychology. Right. So it's all good. It's all good. It's finding what works. But yeah, I agree that the questioning and finding, ways of eliciting from that person their own stuff, their own healing resources. It goes, back to Erickson, of course. He always believed that people had the resources inside themselves to heal themselves. And it wasn't, I'm not healing you. You're healing yourself. I'm helping you to find those resources and, put them in the right place for you. But you're the one that's doing that.
And I love the idea of, again, it harkens me to the idea of energy, that we're always, always, always asking questions. Our brain, it's always what our mind is doing. So we might as well utilize and use that energy and direct it. Yeah. A lot of times one of the classic sort of things I would do, and I don't know if it was necessarily a sleight of mouth per se, but I would ask our, the people would come, our clients would come in and say, who here thinks they're successful? And very few hands would ever raise, because they're in rehab. They're like, dude, I'm in rehab. Like, you're making me feel worse by asking me that question. Am I successful? And I said, well, just out of curiosity, successful people, are they creative? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. As well, are they focused? Like, well, yeah. I said, are they willing to do whatever it takes to get to get to their goals? Like, well, yeah. I said, and what if they're told no about something? What do? Well, they figure out another way. I'm like, all right. So when you were active in your addiction, were you focused on getting your drug of choice? And they'd be like, well, yeah. I said, were you creative in how you would get it? And they're like, yeah. I said, would you do whatever it took? Yeah. I said, well, what if someone told you no? What did you do? I said, we found another way. I said, give yourself a hand. You are successful. Right now, let's just change the context. Let's just now shift that energy towards your outcome. If you put, and I know you've heard this, man, if only you put 10% of what, the energy you put into getting your drugs of choice into going to school, you'd be a genius or whatever. That's what they're saying. And like, yeah. And it would, again, give them an opportunity of access. It's like, not making the person bad. It's just a non-resourceful behavior. They weren't bad, and it helped them see that. Yeah. And that's important, because then they'd have ownership.
Oh, that's great. And again, it's Erickson would be proud. That is often what he would do. He say the problem is the solution. Mm-hmm. I just need to find it a different context in which to express it. But that is the same strategy. You just have to apply it in a different way. So again, bravo. That's brilliant stuff. How did you get involved in all this? How did you get involved in all this coaching and personal growth stuff? Well, you were a music producer, weren't you?
Yeah. So it started, I play guitar. I was a singer, and, some of the bands I toured with, I played bass in. So I was kind of a little bit of everything. And, I was always into music, and I don't know about you. And I know I would always ask this. I know everybody thinks, they have this thing inside them that they know they're here for a reason. like we all have that somewhere. Like there's something like we're here, like that quintessential, like, why are we here kind of thing. But I always had this real love of people. And at early age, I remember I was like, it's probably 8 or 9 years old. I remember seeing we were at the dinner for like Christmas or something, and we went to a nice restaurant, and there was a guy sitting there by himself. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, like this poor guy, he's all by himself. Like, let's invite him over, to have dinner with us. Poor guy, he's lonely. And they were like, all right, go ahead, go ask him. And I did, and he didn't come over. But like, that's always something that like was inside his care. But I grew up misunderstood. Like, I always felt like I grew up, I was the misfit. I was a misfit on the island of misfit toys. I always felt like a square peg, in a bunch of round holes. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I felt misunderstood always. I was always on some weird path to figure myself out. And I was either pissed or depressed. Like, that was it. I grew up and I was either punching stuff or like, what was me? Like, it was just miserable. And then one night I came home, I was like 17 years old, 16, 17, probably, high school, senior in high school, hammered. And Tony Robbins was on the infomercials like all the time. So this is going back to probably like 87. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? Something about this guy. There's something about the cut of his enormous jib that I get. There's something about it that made sense to me. So the next morning I go downstairs, hungover, and I'm like, Mom, give me your credit card. And she's like, what for, honey? And I'm like, dude, Tony Robbins, personal power. I want to get that. She's like, we have that, honey. I'm like, we do? It's like, yeah, it's in the den. We go downstairs, still wrapped, never opened, cassettes. So I started listening to it. And
how did they get there? Who bought them?
My mom bought them and never opened it.
Wow.
She may have seen it and said, this looks really interesting. And, just didn't do anything about it. So I started digging into that, listening to it. And that is what set me on the course to music, by the way, because I was like, I went to one day of college and I was like, this is not for me. Like this is worse than high school. So I went to one day, my dad paid for it and everything. And I just like, no, this isn't going to work. I'm going to pursue music. And I applied what Tony talked about. He's like, model successful people, find a successful person and find out what they did. So I was like, all right, well, let me do that. And I started investigating and my dad would have paid for school. So I looked at Five Towns College and Berkeley, and I wasn't really musically inclined enough. I didn't really have that virtuosity to go to Berkeley. Mm-hmm. Five Towns was a local production school. And let me back up. The music I was making, I wasn't happy with. Kind of sucked anyway. Like, I didn't like how it sounded. So when I did my due diligence and I started looking at successful people, I was like, I'd have to intern anyway. And all the most successful producers and artists and all of that, most of them, like, they just did it. They didn't go to school for it. And if I'm going to have to go intern anyway, I might as well. So that's what I did. I got into interning and I would listen. I just quit. I was working at a music store, like doing, I was like stocking the store and stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to go work at the studio. I'm going to work for nothing. And I interned. And all I did was like listen to Tony like that whole time and all that. And I started really developing my career in the music industry by modeling and applying Tony's stuff. Now, interesting point. One of the guys that I started working with, I just interviewed him the other day on my show. His name's Peter Zizzo, was on that infomercial with Tony, with Fran Tarkenton that I watched that got me inspired to watch that. And he was one of the guys on the infomercial. So like, that was a cool thing. Like, I'm in the right place. Like, people are like getting, this whole thing. And then I became friends with Dee Snider, and Dee Snider was a big Tony guy and all this. So I just applied everything. And really my career took off because of that. And then I started helping. Then I was like, okay, now I want to learn even more because I was having marital issues and so forth. And I'm like,
So you were having marital issues?
Yeah.
You got married in there somewhere?
Yeah, I did. I ended up getting married while I was working in the studio.
Wow.
And I was having like a lot of challenges, and it was all communication based. And I'm like, I got to take responsibility here. Like, I'm something, either I communicate poorly going out, or I communicate poorly coming in. But either way, I'm going to take responsibility. Either I'm doing it wrong or I'm hearing it wrong. I got to learn. So I dug even more into Tony and all of that. And then that's when I met you. And your history with Tony helped close the deal for sure, because that was like, oh, cool. I'm going to get this. Like, you know, there's another, you know, social proof, as it were. Like, I'm going, okay, cool. Like, we're in the same vibe. We get that. And we hit it off. Music. You have the music background and all of that. And what I started to really enjoy using NLP skills to help bring out these incredible performances of the artists I was working with. I would help the singers, like, get into a more creative state and, you know, do cool trance stuff and help them, you know, do the circle of excellence and help them get into state, and, you know, all these cool things that you learned from you and applied and modified and just had fun with. And it was super, super powerful. And then I started just helping bands monetize. So I was coaching bands and then speaking at music conferences on how to monetize, because things were getting crazy in the music industry and so forth. And then the peak of my career was when Napster came out. So I had to, you know, the record companies, everything kind of fell apart. And by that time, I think I was already going to events, like seminars and so forth. And, you know, I was like, okay, let me apply all this that I learned and do some self-coaching and go, why do I do what I do in music? Like, why do I do this? And I started looking at it and I started unpacking all the reasons why I did it. And I was like, well, then if I'm just a coach and a speaker, I can help people make incredible music of their lives. I can get the same benefits. I can help people. Like, one of the things I loved was, like, you know, even if I just, you know, produced a record and it's a song they played at their wedding, I contributed to, you know, a wonderful experience and some amazing memories. If I'm on tour and I'm playing a show, man, I'm giving them a distraction. They're not thinking about the woes of their life. They're distracted. They're releasing, you know, and I get to travel and meet new people. I'm like, well, if I coach and speak and go out there, I'm like a rock star in the personal development world. I get to be part of a transformation. I get to travel and meet new people. I still get to, you know, quote, perform. You know, there's an element of performance in seminar leadership because you got to engage and entertain.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was like, this is everything that I do music for times a million. And now I'm serving God for, you know, like, when it gets into a really deep level, because now I'm like, man, I'm actually helping, instead of just distract people, helping them create a better life. They're leaving a conversation better off than when they got there.
In a sense, instead of giving them a fish, you're teaching them how to fish.
Yeah.
Neat. Very, very cool. I didn't actually know that whole story. That's so amazing. By the time I was around where Tony Robbins was doing those infomercials in the late 80s, I was almost at the tail end of my musical career. You know, because my band broke up in 86 when I was first learning those things. And it's amazing that you listening to those tapes is what got you into music in the first place. It's kind of astonishing to me. It's amazing.
Well, and what's interesting, Peter shared that he was an artist and shifted into just being okay with not being the artist and just being a songwriter. And he attributes, you know, applying what he got from personal power to be okay with letting that go and making that shift. And, you know, he's been, you know, winning Grammys and Emmys and all sorts of great stuff. And it was just because he was able to allow that shift occur in him.
That's so cool. So cool. Nate, thank you for that. That's a fascinating history. Fascinating history. So when it comes back to coaching, how can a person today who is entering the field or is struggling, you were talking about monetizing music. How can a person, in a sense, monetize being a coach? What essential skills are necessary for a person to be able to survive, to make a living, perhaps even to thrive as a coach? I agree with you. To be a coach, one of the essential skills is to really want to help another person. But how do you help yourself at the same time?
Yes, those are coaching skills.
Yeah.
So when I was leaving Tony and going to to work at Palm, he said to me, look, dude, guys, remember this. You are not a coach. You are not a speaker. You are not a trainer. You're not an author. You are a marketer of your coaching, your training, your speaking, and your books. So it's another hat that one must wear, because we could be the best coaches on the planet, and if no one knows who we are, we're helping nobody. So I think that to be an effective coach with impact, we need to also be an effective marketer with impact, and recognize that, and it's sad because I think like that's the weird line that we straddle. Healers straddle, I believe. I see it in teachers, in our therapists, for example. When we were at Palm, we would talk to the therapist and say, hey, you can make more money. You could sell your therapy when they leave. I'll show you how to do it. You could sell our coaching, and we'll give you, a referral fee. You could sell the family program. We'll give you a referral fee. And they're like, I can't sell. No, that's not what I do. I just want to help people. And I think a lot of healers have that line where they're more focused on the work than they are on the marketing. Mm-hmm. And I fall prey to it too sometimes. Like it's like, look, I'd just rather be, helping that person rather than talking about myself, how I can help that person. So that's the challenge. So one of the things that we really need to do as caring, healing people is also get around that mindset that, we're not helping them if that person, A, doesn't know who we are, and B, isn't willing to invest in themselves, because then it's free advice, right? So sometimes you got to take on free coaches, free clients, and you do that for testimonials and do that for experience, get your chops up, get some testimonials, get some results, get some confidence, and then use that. In order to really make that money is to decide and get some self-coaching, maybe hire, and I would say hire a coach. Mm-hmm. To help you, because you can't also with integrity ask someone to pay you for your coaching if you're not willing to pay someone. Yeah,
I agree with that statement. Absolutely. Yeah,
so that's a huge step for somebody at first, because I think sometimes if you're not able to invest in yourself, you're going to always have an other than conscious program running in the background that someone thinks the same way, and they're not going to want to hire you. However, if you're willing to go, hey, you know what? This is a valuable service and I pay for it, I'm going to attract and find other people who find it as valuable and be willing to pay me for it. And the other thing is that there's an element, there's a couple things. One, niche a little bit, right? You got to niche. You can't be a coach to everybody, all things. So be able to find something that you are great at, that you can help someone, that you have a passion for. And, the hardest thing that I found for myself as well is that, hey, what we do can help everybody.
Yeah.
I can help everybody. Right. And we can.
Yeah.
But if you market to everybody, you're marketing to nobody, because you're not connecting with anybody. I've spent many years when I was, studying marketing and so forth. And again, I can sometimes be the plumber with the leaky sink, because again, my heart is to help everybody. So when someone does come to me, I go, yeah, no, I'll help you with that. I'll do that. But it does then create an interesting mindset. So be willing to niche down, because even Tony niched at first. He didn't start out as Tony Robbins, helper of everybody. Right. Some of the things he started with the phobia cure, right? That was one of his first things, the impossibles thing. So that's a pretty niche market. Mm-hmm. And then as he started to grow his business, he started in like real estate and sales and, helping and network marketing and being like a sort of a sales person trainer thing at first. No one really knows that, because everyone is so synonymous with just personal power. So niche down, be able to wear a marketing hat and dedicate time to marketing. Hire a coach to help you with your marketing. I would suggest, if you can, at least do a done with you situation. And what that means is you have a few options. You could do your own research and do it all yourself. takes a lot of time and could be very costly. Done with you is come alongside me. And it's kind of like hiring a coach where they're maybe, having, you're having meetings and you're providing content and they're showing you how to do it and you're doing it together, whether it be, whatever your marketing style would be, mostly online now. And then done for you, which would be, hey, I'm just paying you. You do everything. You build everything. You come up with the content. You come up with everything. And I would suggest doing a done with you conversation when it comes to marketing. But hire a coach that's going to help you with all of that. Because they're going to be able to help you figure out the pitfalls before you do them. And then the other thing is and here's a challenge I had. When I first left working with Tony, there's a part of me is like, I'm going to model Tony. Well, Tony's Tony freaking Robbins in a different place in his life. Mm. There's leverage that he has. There's things that he can get away with that I can't. So it's not, Tony Robbins, right now he filled UPW, 23,000 people in his virtual UPW. But, like for an unheard of person like me, if I can get, 10 or 20 people to an online event, that's great. Mm-hmm. So you gotta recognize where you're at and then go, you know what? I also know probably there's going to be multiple people who I know at least 10% more of what that person is at, that I could help them a little bit. And through that experience of helping others, you'll then be able to build that momentum, build that confidence, and be able to help even more people and expand it. It's just, we've got to start somewhere, right? You don't have to get it right. You just have to get it going. That's
great advice. Don't let the, desire to have it be perfect stop you from, going, just get it going. Like, was it Goethe who said, just if you have an idea, start it because boldness has genius in it or something like that. At least I think that was attributed to him. I think there's some evidence that he didn't actually say that quite precisely, but nevertheless, good advice.
It still stands.
It still works. Whoever said it, it's true. Wow. That was just amazing. Thank you. That's really, really filled with great information. That's phenomenal. It's going to take a while to unpack that. But I'd also say, about Tony Robbins, even when he wasn't, niching towards a particular marketplace, his original stuff was, the fear and power of firewalk experience. He had this very specific application of NLP. He was teaching NLP in those days. I learned NLP from him because of that workshop. So I had no idea what NLP was, no idea whatsoever. And I went to that workshop because actually a friend of mine dragged me to it, but it was really cool. And I thought, wow, this is actually surprisingly interesting. So I wanted to learn more, and I went ahead, and his longer, bigger offering was to become certified in NLP. So I did that. It was a 15-day training, and I got certified in NLP back in 1986.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is back then, everything that he was doing was so new. Whereas now coaching and seminars and all that is, it's a lot more effort to niche down. Whereas his, even just fear into power today would be still very vague.
Right.
But back then it was like, what? That's a firewalk. Oh, that's amazing. Who does that?
Right. Yeah. And now there's many thousands of people who have done it. So we can grow that. And yes, you can still find a way. You can still find your unique selling proposition. And you're right. We have to wear multiple hats as coaches. We want to be the best coach we can be to help others. Absolutely. We work hard, or we study. I hire a coach of my own to, help me with that. But it's also, if you just do that, you're not going to have too many clients that you're helping. So you have to work on the marketing aspect as well. And of course, that covers a lot of territory these days with Facebook advertising and internet and having a website or not. And I remember the first days I was working in the field, I did Yellow Pages ads, and Yellow Pages don't even exist anymore. People don't even know what that means. What's a phone book? A phone book? What's a phone book? You mentioned cassette tapes. What's a cassette tape?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And yet some of this, wisdom doesn't get old. And some of the things you're saying, Tony Robbins took the modeling thing that inspired you so much to get into music. That's NLP right there.
Yep.
It's totally NLP. That's what modeling, that's where NLP came from. That's in a sense what NLP is modeling. So,
in many respects, I mean, I still do it to this day.
Yeah.
It's actually inherent in all of my conversations modeling. I'm almost always asking someone, basically, how did you get where you are today? Like, tell me, like, what did you?
Which is a pertinent question, whether they're an addict or a CEO of a company.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so true. And, it's like, okay, I'll learn the model, what not to do, and also help them. But yeah, I mean, it's just that thing of being genuinely curious. And I think that's that authentic care. Like, it's a genuine interest in that person. Either way, yeah. Are you in pain or are you super happy and successful? The line of questioning is going to give me information that I will be able to use in various contexts.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant stuff. So, Doug, how do people find you? What is this?
Great question. Thank you. Well, are you feeling stressed out? Perhaps overwhelmed by trepidation and anxiety? Go ahead to guidedhypnotic.com.
Guided
hypnotic meditation. Yeah. Guidedhypnotic.com is just a place where you can get a free guided hypnotic meditation. I attribute.
You don't talk like that on the guided hypnotic. You don't talk like that on it.
Sometimes there's elements.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And it's theatrical, right? Again, to stand out. Like, I want to, have it be a different experience. Okay. So I use a lot of, I put some cool binaural beats and stuff in there as well.
Okay, cool.
So guidedhypnotic.com, therealdealon.com is my podcast, which you will be a guest on soon as well. And the purpose of that show is kind of what we talked about. Like, what I do is just unpacking people's models, right? How did they get to where they are? And, a lot of the people we have on are personal development people, guys like yourself, we had James Ray, David Shermer, Marshall Silver. Haven't gotten Tony yet, but those types of people. And then a lot of entrepreneurs, real estate and other, and then people who've succeeded in recovery, who have had some challenges and overcome them and have created an incredible life. And some you may know, Darren Prince, who's a big agent, and Jennifer Jimenez and Tim Ryan, like all these people who've created these incredible lives and have something to share. How do they do it? Because the thing is, I think everybody thinks, and a lot of music people too, I forgot, like Dee Snider and Peter Zizzo was on there, Richie Cannata from Billy Joel. And so it's just a lot of fun people who lost everything maybe and had to start over. Or who started from nothing and had to that, or just like, had these obstacles right now with the, put a timestamp on this, dealing with COVID and all that. Everybody's had to reinvent themselves in some area of their life. So the origination of doing this was for that, to help people go, hey, I'm not alone. There are other people who have had to figure it out and maybe be inspired by it and get some great ideas and go, oh, wow, okay, cool. Well, that was a good way of thinking. That was an interesting perspective. Okay, cool. I could shift the way I'm looking at this. This may not be as bad as I think. This is not a crisis. It's a circus. It's not a tragedy. It's an opportunity for triumph. So, that's the goal for that. And then just revolutionarygrowth.com is like the parent of all of that.
Revolutionarygrowth.com is the parent of all of that. But the podcast is The Real Deal On?
Yep, The Real Deal On.
TheRealDealOn.com.
So I say I'm getting the real deal on NLP.
Okay,
real deal on, succeeding in music. The real deal on and, speaking. The real deal on being an author. My book, Under Construction. Underconstructionbook.com. That was the book I wrote, as kind of like a case study of dealing with all the challenges in the addiction world. It's on HCI and Simon & Schuster. And, that you can find, it's pretty much any of those sites too. It's probably there somewhere, but, Under Construction Book, you could get more info on that too.
Very cool. Well, gosh, it's great to see you again. And thank you so much for all this amazing information. This has been great. Really, really.
Thank you. I mean, dude, you are such a huge part of me just being on this path, and I owe you a huge debt of gratitude for just being an incredible mentor and friend. You know, you were around for so many crazy parts of my life, and if you weren't there directly, you know, as a coach, I was using, you know, what would Doug do? And, what would Doug say right now?